Welcome back to On The Fly. We're previewing the predicting and recapping World Junior Championships, the Men's World Championships, the Women's World Championship, the U18 Men's World Championships. Expect the unexpected.
Absolute abomination of the Canadian Junior Nationals.
I have a couple extra words I want to use on that one. And it's Freebird. Freebird, Freebird, Freebird. Of course, the Olympics are just around the corner. And the coin at the rivalry day.
World Junior history!
Your home for international hockey. This is On The Fly. Hello everyone, welcome back to On The Fly. Here, previewing the team representing Japan at the 2026 Women's Olympic Hockey event happening in Milano and Cortina, Italy. So I'll hop into today talking a little bit about the history of this Japanese team at this tournament, and it's one that's been a little bit shaky. You think to their last three tournaments, they're in all three of them back in 2022 with a 6th place finish. 2018, they also had a 6th place finish. And in 2014, they finished 8th at this tournament. They also finished 6th at the 1998 inaugural Women's Olympic Hockey event. And so for this Japanese team this year, it's going to be another tournament where they're a bit of a wild card. And it's the beauty of this Japanese team. You can think back to the last few years at the Women's Worlds in particular, where they really benefited from having Russia kicked out of that tournament, where they kind of lived in Group A for 2021, 22, or 22, 23. And so you look at this tournament and the way they've been playing, especially in these last few years, where they've had some very good games. They've struggled to score goals in others. And really, it all comes down to how well they play defensively. And so there's three kind of things that end up working together for this Japanese team. And they've struggled to have all three things going on any given night, because sometimes it's their offense that falls apart. Sometimes it's their defense that doesn't work. And sometimes their goaltending can't stop a puck. And so for Japan at this tournament in particular, it's going to be a bit of a wild card tournament for them, where expectations are relatively low. I think more low than in years past, where even teams like the Swedes, like the Czechs, haven't really been kind of favored against Japan. Germany you can throw in there as well. We did just do our preview videos for both Sweden and Germany. You can find those in the link in the description. But you look at the way Japan situates themselves this year in Group B. They're pretty comfortably the third best team in the group, behind Sweden, behind Germany, and I'd say well ahead of France and well ahead of Italy. And so for Japan this year, it's going to be more about continuing the legacy onward. And it's the beauty of not playing in you can call it the Women's Worlds tournament, where there's the potential to go down and get sent down to Division 1A. But for Japan, they're looking to make a mark at this tournament, especially because, once again, they have the pieces in place. They've shown themselves to be a Group A team earlier in the 4-year span of the last Olympics. And now it's just a matter of whether or not they're able to keep it going. And so for Japan this year, we'll see if they're able to pull off any upsets. Some big games coming up against both Sweden and Germany, which will more or less determine their fate. As once again, you want to try and avoid having to play Canada or the US. If you finish third or second in Group B, you want that top spot. Get the easier quarterfinal matchup this year. Likely will be playing either the Czechs or the Finns, and so it'll be an interesting game for this Japanese team if they do end up getting that matchup. We'll introduce you now to the roster. We'll start here with the fourth: Rui Akita, Suzuki Maeda, Haruko Toko, Mii Miura, Akane Shiga, Yumiko Wajimi, Makoto Ito, Ryo Noro, Riri Noro, Aya Taida, Umiko Odara, Rimi Koyama. Then in the defense with Akane Hoshioda, Shiora Koiki, Ayaka Hirosato, Oyo Shiga, Kanami Siki, Shiori Yamashita, Kohana Sato, and Nana Akimoto. Then the goaltenders, Rei Halloran, Miyu Masuhara, and Riko Kawaguchi. And so you look at this team, and once again, it's a bit of a team waiting in the weeds to try and beat teams like Germany, like Sweden, because they have the pieces in place and they can play with a lot of pace. But the problem is that they struggle to kind of turn that momentum and turn that speed into actual results, and goals in particular have been a particular struggle for them in recent tournaments. And so you look to a few key players to kind of help with that breakthrough. It comes from both the offensive and the defensive side, especially with this Japanese team who plays very fast hockey, but they struggle to kind of convert. And so players you look for, especially on the forwards, is Rui Akita, a player that really took it to the next level at the most recent Women's Worlds. They'll look to her to provide a lot of the offense on this team as well. Mai Miura is another one who you can kind of look to provide a little bit more of that offensive punch. Though the entire Japanese team will play a lot of defense. That's just kind of the joy of how they play and their structured hockey and the way that they play the game. But you look to them to kind of provide a little more of that offensive punch, as well as Akane Shiga. She's a player that has had, of course, PWHL experience. You can look to her to kind of lead this Japanese team. I'd say between her and Yukita, probably two of the best players on this Japanese team, as well as Makoto Ito, to kind of be that kind of playmaker almost for this Japanese team. You look to kind of the other three to be those finishers. You'll look to Ito to really set up the plays for this Japanese team. And so you look to those forwards to kind of provide a little bit of that offensive punch, but it also comes down to their defense. And so I'd say if you look on their defensive side, Akane Hosoyamada is another player that you'll look to provide a little bit on the offensive side as far as jumping into the rushes, but especially on the back end side where you look to her to provide a lot of that shutdown roles where games get close late towards the game, third period, last 10 minutes, you're going to look to her to play a lot of those minutes and a real important bulk of those minutes, especially in those important games against the Swedes, against Germany. And if they want any shot at going to, eventual have a shot in the quarterfinals, being the top seed in Group B, those are the kind of players you're going to need to really step it up and play at their best, as well as Ayora Shiga, who is another player that you look to provide that defensive first mindset, but also is able to jump into the rush. And so those are kind of the key defenders for this Japanese team. As for the goaltending, with Miyu Masahura, she'll be, I'd say, the lockdown starter. I don't think they'll even change their goaltenders. That's the kind of the joy that we see in Group B, is every game is so important. Because if you lose one game, and we saw that in the most recent Olympics, where Japan had some struggles with China early on in the tournament, they need to play their best players in every single game. And so Masahura, you can look to be that kind of shutdown goaltender in net, and in many ways she'll be kind of the backstop, and you're going to need her to be at her best, especially when you play Sweden, especially when you play Germany, because if she's not at her best, this Japanese team is going to have some problems. And so you always look to the goaltending for any team that's looking to try and upset, especially when they're a defensive team like Japan, who's in the past struggled with scoring goals. And I'd expect that to carry over into this tournament as well. It'll be interesting to see how far this Japanese team will go, especially with the roster they have. We'll now move over to the schedule. And we'll start here on February the 6th, where they will play France at 6:10 a.m. Eastern Time. February the 7th, they'll play Germany at 6:10. February the 9th, 6:10 as well against Italy. And then February 10th, 6:10 once again against Sweden, which will be one of the most important games for them at this tournament. And you always look to kind of what's to come at this tournament for Japan. But if they do make it to the quarterfinals, February 13th and 14th will be the quarterfinals. Remember that the staggered groups are still in place for this Women's Olympic tournament, which means that A1 plays B3, A2 plays B2, A3 plays B1, and then A4 and A5 will play each other in the quarterfinals, which then moves on to the semifinals. All teams are reseeded following the quarterfinals, which will be on February 16th. February 19th at 8:40 a.m. Eastern Time will be the bronze medal game, and at 1:10 p.m. will be the gold medal game. I don't expect to see Japan this far down the line in the tournament. They'll need quite a few miracles to get to this point, and most importantly of those miracles, beating both Sweden and Germany, which are very unlikely. But the key games for Japan at this tournament, we touched on it already quite a bit, but the first one is Germany. And if Japan wants any shot at being even competitive at this tournament, they need to first beat Germany. And it's going to be a tighter game than I think most people might give it credit for. But we've seen it in the last few years, especially at the Women's Worlds, where Japan and Germany are still fairly close as far as talent goes. And it just kind of comes down to which team can find the back of the net and control that momentum past that point. I still give the edge to Germany, but Japan is poised for an upset between one of the big teams at this tournament. Germany, in my eyes, is the most likely that we're going to see as far as upsets go. Sweden and Japan as well on February the 10th is their second most important game, because if they don't beat Germany, they're likely not going to win the group anyway. But when they play the Swedes, that game is oh so important, because once again, you want to finish higher in the group, get the easier quarterfinal opponent, and you can't do that if you can't beat both Sweden and Germany. There is the potential for a three-way tie, but it's very unlikely that Japan ends up winning that three-way tie, just with the way that these other two teams play and the likelihood of a blowout in one of the other games. And so for the Swedes, and when Japan plays the Swedes, you're going to look for them to really take on that next level and play a real shutdown game. But as soon as the Swedes get going offensively, it'll be up to Japan to try and shut that down, because if they can't, this game's going to end in a blowout as well. But they do have the potential, once again, to kind of to upset the Swedes, because the Swedes are arguably the standalone favorite in Group B, and we'll see kind of what the result of that is. Which then moves us over to the quarterfinals. For Japan, the likely teams are going to be playing, assuming they make it. A reminder that only the top 3 teams in Group B do end up making it on to the quarterfinals. Japan will likely play either Canada or the US, unless they come in that top spot in the group, where they'll play either Finland or the Czechs. They can find their way through that quarterfinal. They'll likely play either the US or Canada in the semis, which will more or less end in a loss in an ugly fashion too, I may add. And so if they find their way to the semis, you'll likely see them in the bronze medal on the 19th at 8:40 a.m., which will be against your pick of the litter, whether it be the Czechs, whether it be the Finns, whether the Swiss upset in that span too. Will be interesting to see, because you look at the way that this Japanese team is folded, and we've talked about it all video, there is a potential for them to kind of pull off that big upset, but they need to play their game. They need to find some goals. They need to be able to look to your key players to really, really lead this team, especially when the games get close, because that's their kind of style of game, is keep the games as close as you possibly can until the final whistle. So for this Japanese team this year, they are looking to try and get themselves back into a medal contention, and it'll all start with how well they can play in Group B. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like. If you really are subscribing, tell all your friends down below your thoughts on Team Japan. Until next time, see you.